PSUSENNES I, the Silver Pharaoh. How does this man relate to the history of Egypt in 1047 BC, the time in which he lived, and the man's life? In the same way as Tutankhamun, he came to prominence by discovering his tomb. Neither would have survived as footnotes in history.
Pierre Montet and his team worked in the Nile Delta in the years just before the outbreak of the Second World War, and their results yielded a discovery far beyond anything one could have imagined. They were working in an ancient area called Tanis in the Nile Delta. Egyptologists have only moderately explored this area over the centuries. It is relatively easy to excavate in desert areas, whereas it is complicated in the Delta region. Egyptologists still haven't located 70 rulers, including PSUSENNES I. After the Ramesses pharaohs, the third intermediate period was characterized by economic, political, and social turmoil. PSUSENNES I was born into this world. There were two regions in the country, the north and the south. No one rested easy, but there was a sense of unity.
Although others had tried to emulate Ramesses II, PSUSENNES I wanted to emulate Ramesses II. He even affixed his name to that of Ramesses II, as evident in some cartouches. As a result of the significant change in Nile flow, PSUSENNES I moved the city of Pi-Ramesses to a new location, so the area could have access to water.
In addition to taking a great deal of time, doing this would have provided us with valuable information about his character. A picture of him and a description of his physical characteristics have been provided by contemporary researchers. His stamina and apparent determination were immediately evident. Two things are exciting about PSUSENNES I. It is believed that he ruled Egypt for the most extended period in the history of any king. His tomb had not entered antiquity, so it was completely intact. The ancient robbers stopped digging as soon as they reached his grave, even though there were tombs immediately adjacent to his tomb complex, as if they had gone far enough, it seems. The world was focused on far more critical issues when the tomb was discovered, according to 20th century chronology. In response to Germany's advance into Poland, Montet and his group returned to France. During the Desert War, Egypt played a relatively minor role. The Nile Delta and Tanis were only discovered then by Egyptologists. Egyptologists who were aware of the work of the French and decided to reopen the area for further study and exploration were influenced by modern science and technology. PSUSENNES I ruled between 1047 and 1001 BCE. His reign was not the longest in Egyptian history, but he remains the longest reigning pharaoh. Since Ramesses III, Egypt had not had a strong pharaoh. Studies conducted since 1940 have confirmed that he had severe abscessed teeth. As well as back problems, he had to deal with depression and distress later in life. He persevered despite this.
Seknahta's son Ramesses III became pharaoh in 1187. He inherited a stable piece of land, prosperity, and a continuation of his predecessor's international reputation. Despite Ramesses the Great's death, Egypt continued to be strong.
The future of Egypt was seriously affected by a strange set of events. They conquered the entire eastern Mediterranean area under the Sea People. Their attention began to focus on Egypt both on land and at sea. To mount a defense, Ramesses III had no choice but to put forth a significant effort. Having defeated the enemy, he found himself with major socio-economic problems after the war, much like Great Britain after World War II. This marked the end of Egypt as it had known it for over 3,000 years. Egypt was much worse off at the end of his 31-year reign. The economy was in chaos and there was social unrest. In addition, stability had declined. No matter how many horses and men the king had, they couldn't put it back together. Egypt was divided into two nations, the north and the south, under each successive pharaoh from Ramesses IV through to Ramesses XI. Political strife continued to deteriorate, as each next pharaoh succeeded Ramesses IV. We later discovered our man in the silver casket with the coming of the 21st dynasty. Compared to his immediate predecessors, he was very different. He ruled skillfully and efficiently for 46 years. Even though he was gifted, imaginative, and had great expectations, Egypt hadn't seen the likes in hundreds of years. His death brought an end to the true Egyptian nation that had existed since pre-dynastic times.
Scroll of copper with treasures. Near Khirbet Qumran in Cave 3, the copper scroll was discovered for the first time. 3 Dead Sea Scrolls are left, but this one differs from them. Papyrus and parchment had been used to write the other Dead Sea Scrolls, but copper had been used for the copper scroll. A copper sheet mixed with 1% tin was used for writing. It lists the location of hidden silver and gold, instead of literary work like the others.
The language of this scroll shares some similarities with other Dead Sea Scrolls. Although it has been written in Hebrew, it resembles the Mishnah language more than the literary Hebrew you see in other scrolls. Copper scrolls have been on display in Amman's Jordan Museum since 2013. At first, it was on display at the Jordan Archaeological Museum. A Jordan Department of Antiquities sponsored archaeological expedition discovered the copper scroll in addition to the Dead Sea Scrolls discovered by Bedouins. As the last of the 15 Dead Sea Scrolls they found, it was located on March 14, 1952. Copper scrolls are sometimes referred to as 3Q15 because of this. According to experts, the scroll was written between 25 and 75 CE. The treasure mentioned in the copper scroll accumulated during the First Jewish War. The scroll is believed to have originated around 70 CE according to David Wilmot. However, the copper scroll was found behind more than 40 jars, so it had to predate 68 CE according to Emil Puech.
There are 64 different locations listed in the text. The scroll contained silver and gold in 63 of the locations. These treasures are estimated to weigh thousands of pounds by archaeologists. Tithing vessels were also listed in the entries, and the final entry provides details on a duplicate document. The other scroll has not yet been discovered by archaeologists.
In the minority view, the treasures listed on the scroll had already been recovered when the scroll was discovered. By creating the scroll, they hoped the reader would have an intimate understanding of the obscure references. Among the treasures stashed away from the prying eyes of the Romans are 41 talents of silver in column 2 of the scroll, verses 1 to 3. The prize was estimated to be worth more than $1 trillion in 1960. The existence of the treasure has been debated by scholars for decades. There was an expedition led by John Allegro to locate the scroll in 1962. As a result of their excavations, they were unable to find anything. There is either a treasure hidden well, or it has been discovered long ago. The Romans destroyed the Temple of Herod, revealing the prize.
Japan's Ancient Mysteries, JOMON. Ancient Japan began with what the Japanese called Shakodogu, also known as the Staring Dogu. As a hunter-gatherer culture, JOMON was primitive in many respects. Animal skins were used in JOMON clothing. The above-shown dogu wears a unique garment that resembles armor, so why does it wear it? The clothing is definitely unique, even if it isn't armor. How could such a dress have been imagined in a culture where clothing wasn't made from anything but hides?
The staring dogu is not the only such object found in Japan, which makes it even more intriguing. In the ancient Jomon territory, mainly in the north, several figurines resembling one another were excavated. There was no doubt that this representation was common knowledge. How were people scattered far apart, creating almost identical clay representations when the Jomon population of the Japanese archipelago numbered only about 250,000 at its peak? See the previous article of July 23, 2006. During that time, walking was the only mode of transportation. Even though JOMON were partially nomadic hunters, that does not explain why they accepted the image of a staring figurine so readily, despite not being in regular contact. Is it possible for a primitive culture to imagine images that nobody has ever seen, transforming them into physical representations accepted by its far-flung citizens? Furthermore, why did the JOMONs waste their time and energy making elaborate clay dogu without practical use? Are there real-life examples of religious or talismanic objects that could have inspired these objects? These objects' aesthetic complexity did not make their religion simplistic. Like many ancient cultures, such as the ancient Brits with Stonehenge and other circular stone formations, JOMON also left mysterious stone circles. Stone circles may have been used for various purposes, but we do not know precisely what they were used for. Solstices and equinoxes are believed to have been tracked using them for religious rituals. Though JOMON pottery is highly skilled and detailed, it was not produced on a potter's wheel because they did not know about it. As mundane food preparation utensils and storage containers, JOMON vases featured in my June 10, 2006 article seem out of place in everyday life.
Pottery was simplistic and practical during the Yayoi period, 300 BCE to 300 AD. That followed the JOMON period. Compared to JOMON pottery, it lacked aesthetic elements and conceptual and artistic complexity. Yayoi period clay dogu sculptures were not found. Staring dogu had no longer been inspired by the impetus that had inspired its creation.
Apparently, the JOMON lived a far more advanced lifestyle than was previously thought. Alternatively, they may have been influenced by something outside of themselves. There is no doubt about it. The aesthetics of the clay creations of the JOMON and the supposedly primitive conditions of their daily lives are at odds. There is still a lack of sufficient explanation for the origins of their artistic inspiration and elaborate religion.
The Shroud of Turin's Face, an analysis. A 2-hour History Channel programme aired The Face on the Shroud of Turin on Tuesday, March 30th, 2010. Using the latest in 3D software and scientific analysis, producers attempted to recreate the face of the individual believed to be buried in the Shroud of Turin. This resulted in an almost palpable buzz among religious and scientific communities.
Christians have come closest to seeing Jesus Christ's face through the Shroud of Turin. Many believers still consider the shroud to be the authentic burial cloth of Jesus, even though many researchers have discredited it as a fake. It should be fascinating for believers and non-believers to see what this face looks like, regardless of whether the cover is real or fake. Historically, the Shroud of Turin dates back at least to the 1350s, when it appeared in Lille, France. Based on radiocarbon dating conducted in 1988, the shroud dates from between 1260 and 1390. These tests, however, remain controversial due to their lack of accuracy. An image of a crucified man seems on the 14-foot cloth. It is still unclear whether the blanket really depicts Jesus Christ's face. As far as human history is concerned, the Shroud of Turin is the most studied artifact.
Digital illustrator Ray Downing of Studio Macbeth is at the forefront of putting a face to the shroud. It is not just a face painted on a cloth with red ochre pigment, as the Shroud of Turin claims. There is just too much detail in the impression, according to Downing. A person must have draped the fabric over them to obtain the level of detail visible to the naked eye.
A 3D image of Abraham Lincoln inspired Downing to work on this project. A similar project aired on the History Channel as part of another show. With the help of his 3D software, Downing was able to recreate a lifelike image and death mask of President Abraham Lincoln. There was an immediate success with the program. Continuing the Lincoln project, Downing captured detailed pictures of the shroud. To convert these images into 3D, he used the latest technological software. The software could accurately remove distortions from the facial imprint as it lay over the body. According to Downing, the results represent the most realistic representation of Jesus Christ. Technology like this is impressive. Despite the breakthrough, the Shroud of Turin debate remains polarizing. The discussion indeed returns to the forefront, however. History records the most unusual and sensational case of mistaken identity as the Son of God himself. If it isn't the face of Jesus, someone has experienced the most unusual and shocking case of mistaken identity.
Was NEBRA sky disk made by someone who looked to the stars, and why did they look to the stars? There is something odd about the NEBRA sky disk. Approximately 30 centimeters or 12 inches across, this bronze disk is covered with what appears to be a simplified representation of the night sky, which makes it seem like a crude fake or a child's toy. Researchers agree that this portrayal of the heavens is one of the oldest and most fascinating in history.
Approximately 3,600 years ago, the disk was designed to accurately depict the cosmos. The surface is covered by a blue-green patina and is embossed with gold symbols representing the full moon, the sun, stars, and a lunar crescent. It may look primitive, but there are indications that the artifact was observed and measured carefully. 2 golden arcs on either side measure the night sky and sunrise angles between the summer and winter solstice with surprising accuracy. Only recently was the bronze disk discovered in NEBRA, Germany. In 1999, Mario Renner and Henry Westphal discovered the disk while hunting illegally with a metal detector. As looters removed the disk, they caused significant damage. One of the stars on the ground was missing, along with a large chunk of the disk chipped and splintered. The looters tried to sell the disk to the local archaeologists, as well as 2 axes, swords, armlets, fragments, and a chisel. Under German law, the disk, however, was owned by the state of Sachsen-Anhalt and could not be sold. A museum was the right place for the NEBRA sky disk. A Swiss antiquities collector attempted to buy the object from the looters in February 2003. Looters were arrested after the collector collaborated with Swiss police.
NEBRA sky disk's archaeological context was one of the central questions raised. When the looters discovered the disk, there was no specific or solid archaeological context from which to study it. Because nothing like this had been discovered before, dating the object was challenging. Many things buried with the disk could be used for carbon dating.
Combined with its unusual appearance, this led to much debate about the NEBRA sky disk's authenticity. A hoax or archaeological forgery was even suspected at first. A controversy erupted in late 2004 after the disk was recovered. According to Professor Peter Schauer, a German archaeologist from Regensburg University, the disk is a fake. He claimed the green patina was artificially created using a blowtorch, acid, and urine. The ancient object was not actually studied by Professor Peter Schauer, as it was discovered later. Even so, questions remained regarding the NEBRA sky disk's authenticity. To determine the disk's precise dating, other Bronze Age weapons were dated along with it. During the mid-2nd millennium BC, swords and axes were found. Radiocarbon dating was conducted on birch bark particles recovered from the swords. The archaeologists' suspicions that the disk was genuine were confirmed when the results showed the finds were from 1600 to 1560 BC. Germany's Halle Institute for Archaeological Research provided more solid evidence of the disk's authenticity. The institute conducted several tests to verify the NEBRA sky disk's authenticity. By photographing the disk's corrosion, the disk was proven to be a genuine ancient artifact. As a result, it was shown that a disk could not be artificially created.
In addition, German scholars confirmed that the NEBRA sky disk was genuine in 2006 through their latest examinations. Researchers also concluded that the disk synchronized lunar and solar calendars using an astronomical clock. There is no evidence to support this theory, however. Several assumptions have been made about the possible uses of the NEBRA sky disk, although no actual use has been found.
According to some researchers, the disk works like a sundial. The central circle of the disk represents the sun according to this representation. As observed from the Mittelberg Hill in Nebra, Germany, a prominent observation point near the disk, the arcs on the disk's sides may represent the extent of different sunset positions throughout the year. Thus, the angles indicate the moving sunset's classes throughout the year. Others believe it might be an astronomical calculation tool. An advanced astronomical clock could be used to determine harvest and planting times. In the Bronze Age, disks were used in farming and everyday and practical use. Ancient agrarian societies often built such proper functionality, with Stonehenge serving the same purpose of keeping time. Nebra sky disk could be an astronomical/astrological device, according to Wolfhard Schlusser of the University of Bochum. As a result of the arcs around the circumference of the disk, Mittelberg Hill solstices were accurately represented.
The Borgia Codex. Pre-Columbian painted manuscripts such as the Codex Borgia are among the most beautiful. According to legend, it originated in the Tehuacan Valley, or the central Mexican highlands near Puebla, which were under Aztec rule at the time of the conquest.
Beautifully painted before the Spanish arrived, the Codex dates around the 15th century and shows no sign of European influence. It was sent to Spain from Mexico and Italy during the 16th century. In 1805, Alexander von Humboldt saw it in Rome among the possessions of Cardinal Stefano Borgia, who died the previous year and is now kept in the Apostolic Library. Based on its sample-sized Mesoamerican manuscripts, it is presumed that the manuscript was handmade as a unique work of art, though earlier manuscript sequences have been copied. These Mesoamerican codices, screenfold books, are composed of long strips of amate paper or animal skin that have been folded in an accordion style and covered with white lime plaster coatings. Scribal priests were able to paint the manuscript both with mineral and organic pigments. In the Mayan codices, amate paper is produced from the bark of the wild fig tree or Ficus cotinifolia. The original Codex Borgia was made from folded animal skin attached at both ends and folded into a screenfold. Each page measures 27 by 7 centimeters, and it contains 39 pages, 37 of which were painted on both sides of the skin. A total of 76 painted pages with a length of over 11 meters were painted on just one side, and the back side was used to attach them to wooden end pieces. From left to right, this manuscript reads just like the Mayan codices.
Codex Borgia was a religious book created by specialized scribal priests. Due to the lack of a manufacturing device, production was impossible. The manuscripts were not just for storing information or reading for fun, but they also contained oral traditions.
One of the most extended sequences of the Codex Borgia is a mysterious account of events concerning Tula and Teotihuacan. They were involved in many rituals such as sacrifices and ball games. Even though no survivor could read and interpret the Codex as an ancient Aztec priest did, there is plenty of speculation regarding its exact content. Still, one sure thing is that it was a ritual book. Marriage prediction tools were included in the Codex. The last page depicted a beautiful image of the sun god accompanied by 12 birds and a butterfly symbolizing the 13 levels of heaven. Jansen and Perez Jimenez, 2004, describe the Codex Borgia as a codex, a folded pictorial manuscript, used for divination. This manuscript belongs to the so-called Borgia group, which includes the codices Borgia, Vaticanus B, Caspi, Fievari Mea, Laud, Porfirio Diaz, and Fons Mexicain 20. The codices form a group because their contents are all concerned with time cycles and spiritual meanings. The ritual calendar of 260 days provided information about life and death at its core. They are also known as fate books because of their content.
They were intended for religious ceremonies, where the priest would do public readings and prophecies, or even predict the future of those intending to marry, or who were interested in learning about their child's future and other information during the consultation. Among the Central Mexicans and Aztecs, images were more important than words in Mesoamerican books, which embraced time and religion.
People should perform certain rituals when, where, and how to live a good life. Some of the Borgia group codices exist only on one page and are made from a mate paper, but the majority are made from deerskin. Byland, 1993, 14. The pictographic script provides information in the manuscripts. Except for 2 folios painted on both sides, the Codex Borgia contains 39 folios. The result is 76 painted pages, each measuring 27 centimeters in height and width. 2 pages are not painted, and a wooden cover was attached to the outer pages. To make the pages paintable, lime plaster was applied. The pictographs on it were painted with mineral and vegetable pigments.
Cardinal Stefano Borgia, 1731 to 1804, is the collector of the Borgia group codices. For years, his entire collection was stored at the Apostolic Library of the Vatican in Rome, Italy, Byland, 1993. However, the origins of the codices remain a mystery. Most scholars agree that the Codex Borgia originates in Puebla, Tlaxcala, although some believe it originated in Oaxaca's Mixteca Altar.
Analysis of style is the primary basis for this. Mixteca Puebla style is a standard iconographic style found throughout Mexico, but primarily in central Mexico. Hernandez Sanchez, 2005, 17. Based on the style and contents of the Codex Borgia, it can be argued that the people of central Mexico probably shared a similar religious and iconographic system. Consequently, Codex Borgia's content would have been valued by many people. The date and place of its manufacture are also unknown. No Spanish influence is apparent in the manuscript, which was made before the Spaniards arrived, AD 1521. Precisely, it is thought to date from the late 15th century. The contents of the Codex Borgia have been the subject of many studies. Codex Borgia is broadly regarded as describing 260-day ritual calendars and the meanings of specific days within them. Diviners interpreted these meanings to make prognostications or keep humans in harmony with the cosmos. An almanac used for marriage prognostication is included in the Codex, but there are also almanacs for hunting, birth, Venus influences, and traveling. Simply put, they are almanacs that cover a variety of topics. To keep a balanced life, people would consult a diviner in various situations, such as when something terrible happens.
Antarctica and the Piri-Reis map of 1513. Ahmed Muhyiddin Piri created the Piri-Reis map in 1513, an Ottoman Turkish world map. In that case, Antarctica was discovered and mapped centuries before it was reported to have been found in 1773. There is no ice on the Antarctica coastline on the map, which has attracted attention. In response to the request of German theologian Gustav Adolf Deissmann, director Halil Edhem searched the basement of a Turkish palace for old maps in 1929. Edhem discovered a very mysterious artifact. Only a fragment remained of the map, which was inked onto animal skin. At first glance, it looked to be just another old map. On closer inspection, Deissmann noticed something. A copy of Christopher Columbus's map, the Piri-Reis map, was identified as the only known copy.
In addition to the Azores, the Canary Islands, Atlantic Islands, and Japan accurately depicted on the Piri-Reis map of 1513, historians were amazed to discover Antarctica included on the map. Despite this, Antarctica wasn't discovered until 1773, so how could it possibly be on a map 260 years old?
As the mystery deepened, it became more complex. On the Piri-Reis map, the coastline of Antarctica was shown as well as the proportions of the continent without its ice cap. Cartographers, researchers, and historians have debated and contested the Piri-Reis map for decades. Does it prove the existence of an advanced ancient civilization? Does it prove that our own culture's history is incorrect? Can this baffling mystery be solved more straightforwardly? Ottoman Turkish geographer and cartographer named Ahmed Muhaddin Piri, known as Piri-Reis, began mapping the world in 1513. In addition to being an admiral in the Turkish navy, Reis was also an experienced traveller on the high seas. His knowledge of coastlines and continents was extensive. Using 20 different sources, Reis drew the map on gazelle skin, citing all maps and charts as he went. As far back as 400 BC, Piri used some sources. One map by Christopher Columbus, 4 Portuguese maps, and 1 Arab map was among the Ptolemaic 2nd century Hellenistic and Greek societies' maps.
Although Reis documented many lands, he hadn't visited many of them. Despite this, his work was still valued by academics. Even Christopher Columbus's hand-drawn map belonged to Reis. A 20-year-old uncle who sailed with Columbus left it to him in his will. At that time, the only known representation of this map was Reis's reproduction of Columbus's lost map.
However, the map was relatively obscure despite this. Interest in it didn't begin to grow until 1929, after it resurfaced. Several years passed before it was addressed. A few of Professor Charles Hapgood's students examined the map in 1965. Their attention was also drawn to maps showing Antarctica's coastline. Another strange anomaly was also discovered. When moving maps from paper to globe, the Piri-Reis map was created using the Mercator projection, allowing a more accurate curvature. This technique was not employed until 1569 by European cartographers. The map defied time once again. Seeing the Antarctica coastline without ice surprised Hapgood the most. According to Reis, none of the maps he cited showed this. There is no such map known to exist that can serve as a source. It would require a map thousands of years old. Hapgood came to the only conclusion possible from this revelation. Ancient mariners mapped the Antarctic coast before the land had frozen, some 6,000 years ago. According to him, whatever advanced society created the map must have been capable of aerial mapping, since the topographical depiction of the coastline appears so accurate. Piri-Reis probably used one of these ancient maps to create his own, but he failed to cite it. This bold conclusion taught us a lot about civilizations, but it implied all our knowledge was wrong. Ancient cultures did not have the tools or capability to map continents on a grand scale based on what we know. What could have been done to accomplish it? Scholars and historians began to speculate. Extraterrestrial assistance had been suggested by paranormal researchers. A society based around the lost city of Atlantis was hypothesized by others. But soon, skeptics began to dissect Hapgood's findings and Piri-Reis' map. There were some new conclusions they came to.
As a starting point, there were quite a few differences between Reis's map and the modern maps regarding the size of various coastlines. Some areas were completely missing. Based on Reis's source maps, Hapgood inserted some of the missing sections. Reis, however, made copying errors according to Hapgood.
However, there were a few problems that arose. The map now has 5 separate equators after Hapgood filled some empty areas and adjusted land masses to compensate for errors. The map, however, continued to capture other researchers' imaginations. Hapgood claimed that the map was proof of extraterrestrial influence, which was parroted by fraudster Erich von Daniken. On Reis's map, Antarctica barely resembles the actual continent, critics note. Its accurate representation of Antarctica makes the Piri-Reis map so magical. It is believed that the Antarctic landmass may have altered over time, however. Upon discovering all of the errors on the map, it became apparent that the Antarctica on the map may not actually be Antarctica. REIS's sources may answer several of the Piri-Reis map's mysteries. The classical Greek cartographers believed landmasses should be balanced at both ends, so a southern continent was proposed. One must be present in the southern hemisphere to balance the northern one. Due to this mistaken belief, many 16th century cartographers did not know whether an invented landmass existed or not, including it in the southern hemisphere. This might have been the solution, since REIS made his own map using at least 8 Greek maps and charts. Alternatively, there is another, simpler theory. In reality, it is merely the coastline of South America that is depicted with no ice. Researchers have hypothesized Piri-Reis ran out of space on the gazelle skin. Hence, he crammed South America into his itinerary. This theory is supported by REIS's notes. In his notes, he describes the Amazon jungle as scorching and full of snakes. Although these depictions wouldn't match what they knew about Antarctica, they would perfectly describe it. Researchers remained baffled and astounded by the Piri-Reis map despite these findings. People are free to make decisions regarding these questions since no official answer exists. Does the map show Antarctica free of ice more than 6,000 years ago? Could it be proof that alien technology once existed on Earth? Does the map simply depict an imagined southern landmass or the coastline of South America? Or did Charles Hapgood let his imagination run wild?